Hello, everyone. Firstly, let me just express my deep thanks to all of you who subscribed, liked, and left all those incredible comments. You have no idea how encouraging it is to read them, and you guys are the reason I keep making these videos. And a very special thank you to Zether, who you're the only reason I was able to get even a little bit of people to check out my video, and it means the world to me to have your support. I hope you guys enjoy the video, and without any further ado, let's get into it. We return to Deku, lying in his hospital bed, where he begins to stir. Much of Class 1A watches intently, all but Todoroki present, waiting for his eyes to open. He'd open his eyes, instantly feeling his boost in strength, and then the pain, wincing as he sits up in bed. He'd take a look around the room at all the smiling faces around him, the class expressing their thanks to Deku for saving all of them, telling him how much they appreciate what he did for them. Modest as always, Deku would blush and not know how to take these compliments. I didn't do everything. If it wasn't for Todoroki and Bakugo, I would have died before figuring out how to beat that thing. They bought me just enough time to recover, Deku would say humbly. It's at this point when a familiar voice would ring out through the room. You're damn right, you stupid nerd! All that muscle and you still couldn't do it on your own, Bakugo would say, standing in the corner of the room, leaning against the wall. Guess that thing wasn't as strong as we thought, though, seeing as you survived, he says antagonistically. But Deku doesn't care. In fact, he smiles warmly at Bakugo. If you really think so, I'll just sit back and let you take on the next roided-out bird monster, he says before leaning back against his pillow. Bakugo turns away, but he can't help but crack a smile. Eraserhead and Recovery Girl look on from the other room, staring intently at Izuku. After the class leaves, Eraserhead approaches Deku in his bed, his jaw still wired shut. He pats Midoriya on the shoulder, but can't seem to make eye contact, yet he expresses his thanks nonetheless. We now cut to a dark facility, with All For One watching a news report in his shadowy room of many screens. On one of the screens is the crater where Deku had landed. The news seems to think a meteor had struck the Earth, but All For One knows better. It would seem the direct approach has failed, and that we now have a new target of interest. Dr. Uchiko, find me everything you can on this boy. I see great potential in him, he says, a devious grin playing on his scarred face. Back to the heroes, Eraserhead finds himself similarly investigating Deku. Now knowing his father is Omni-Man, Aizawa looks into any files that the police, Hero Association, and Japanese government have on Omni-Man. Everyone knows the story of Omni-Man. One day, he showed up, unaffiliated with any hero agency, and became a worldwide phenomenon, which is partially the reason the Hero Association decided to look over his lack of a hero license. That, and if we're being honest, no one could stop him, even if they wanted. At the very least, he was using his strength to help. Not finding anything useful about his past, Eraserhead instead decides to look into the top 5 heroes' deaths and near death of Omni-Man. Maybe he could find something out about Omni-Man's origin with how he was defeated. Or, at the very least, a clue into the type of strength it would take to overcome someone like Omni-Man and All Might. Giving up on the file search, the next day before class, Aizawa arranges for a meeting with himself, Principal Nezu, and Recovery Girl. At this meeting, Aizawa, now recovered enough from his skirmish with Nomu, explains the situation to Nezu. Nezu, we 3 in this room are the only people who know about Izuku, and presumably Omni-Man. You're the most intelligent creature on the planet, and we need your help, Aizawa says, his tone sincere. I see. This situation indeed requires tact. It's certainly a secret to hold close to the chest. But I believe we can approach a solution and hopefully kill 2 birds with 1 stone, replies Nezu, his wit ever quick despite being caught off guard by the disturbing circumstances. How's that? Recovery Girl croaks. Well, I believe with the help of some key allies, we'll be able to find out exactly what happened to the top 5 heroes, and at the very least, know who is strong enough to beat all of them.
In doing so, we also hope to learn something about Omni-Man and his origin.
Concise, remarks Aizawa.
I'll need to reach out to some contacts, but in the meantime, I'll go about things as normal. We don't want any bad optics to ruin the upcoming sports festival, says Nezu, clasping his hands.
Speaking of which, should Izuku be allowed to partake in the festival? Wouldn't it be a bit unfair? Asks Recovery Girl. We aren't trying to ensure fairness, and we don't want him suspecting something. So long as he doesn't show signs of hostility, we shouldn't tip our hand, Aizawa replies plainly.
I agree. It's not like there aren't standouts every year, and we need more time. However, Aizawa, I want you to be in the announcer's booth with President Mike. You'll keep an eye on the boy and the festival. I only want you watching him. We'll talk again as soon as I have an update. Until then, discuss the topic as little as possible,
Nezu says in a matter-of-fact way.
Understood.
Both Aizawa and Recovery Girl nod before leaving the room. As the door closes, Nezu turns around in his chair, turning on the TV behind his desk. He plays security footage from the USJ security cameras, something only the school has access to. He watches the TV intensely, his eyes not blinking for a moment as he studies every moment of footage. His stomach feels like a great lump of lead resided inside it, as he saw Deku delivering earth-shattering punch after earth-shattering punch.
Quirkless,
Nezu mutters before slumping back in his chair. We now cut to Nolan in the hospital as he opens his eyes, waking up from his coma. His family is called, and a similar scene to what occurs in Invincible happens, with Deku being ecstatic that his father was awake. And he tells Nolan all about what happened at the USJ, with Nolan being very proud of his son's strength, and praises Deku. You're already starting to act like a full-grown Viltrumite, son. You have no idea how happy it makes me to see you come into your power like this, Nolan says. After, the family decides to leave. Deku heads off to school since Nolan woke up very early in the morning, and Nolan goes and demands his suit from the hospital staff, like he did in the show. Now, skipping forward to the announcement of the sports festival, hearing the news about the festival, the whole class starts to get pumped, extremely excited for the festival. Well, everyone but Todoroki. He sits alone, expressionless, something Deku takes note of. He approaches Todoroki, asking him if he's alright. Todoroki's eyes dart to Deku, his jaw muscles flex as he clenches his teeth for a moment before sighing.
Is that a real question? Or do you just want to pretend like you can somehow be the hero to make me feel better, Mr. Invincible?
Todoroki spits. Taken aback, Deku feels a slight tinge of insult and anger, but shakes it off, knowing Todoroki was just lashing out. I'm sorry. I guess I should have asked. Do you want to talk about it? Says Deku in an attempt to be more considerate.
Talk about what? My dead dad? Or the fact that I was too weak to do anything to stop that monster and nearly joined him? That is until big man on the block Deku had to save me. Why couldn't you just let that monster kill me? You had to be the hero.
Todoroki spits venomously.
I'm sorry your dad died. I can't possibly imagine what that feels like.
Deku starts before being cut off.
You're right. You can't possibly imagine. Because somehow your dad got to live. But not mine. I guess that's what he gets for being such a shitty father. But isn't it ironic? I was born to be his #1 hero candidate. Everything he wasn't. Groomed to be the best. And I resented him every day for it. All I wanted was to be free from his influence. His overbearing shadow. But now that he's gone, I don't know who I am without him. Even now, I can't escape his shadow.
Todoroki's voice starts to tremble as he reaches the end of his speech. I know you're going through a lot of pain, but I'm not sorry that my dad isn't dead. And I'm not sorry that I saved you. You're wrong. You saved my life. You bought me just enough time to recover. Without you, I would have died. I was only returning the favor. Now, I'm gonna stop harassing you, and you can either sit here and wallow,
or enjoy the sports festival? Deku retorts, confident and firm, but kind. From that point, we cut to the start of the sports festival. Seeing as Deku was the number one student in the entrance exam, it's his job to give the starting speech. Deku begins to say, hi everyone. Well, let me just say, I wouldn't be here without my mom and dad. Mom, you remind me why I want to be a hero, and are the one who keeps me grounded on Earth, even after I gain the ability to fly. Dad, you inspire me every single day with your strength, courage, and leadership. You're everything I want to be and more. And I'm gonna win this for both of you. The crowd would roar with applause, clearly having chosen their champion for the festival, as Deku would walk off stage completely freaking out, having just spoken to all of those people. We cut to Omni-Man floating above the stadium, his arms crossed as he stares down at the school judgmentally, his fists clenched for a moment as his brow furrows. How easy it would be to destroy all these promising young heroes now. Deku is even here. It'd be the perfect time to show him what the Viltrumite Empire means. But he pauses for a moment, unable to find a way to explain properly to Deku how his life here means nothing. Instead, Omni-Man holds back and floats down to the seating where Inko watches on. There you are! You missed a wonderful speech from Izuku, Inko says scoldingly.
Yeti attack in the Alps. Had to bury him under the mountain. I'm not that late. They haven't even started.
Nolan replies, not even hesitating with the lie. Midnight would announce the first event, and all the students would prepare for the race. The shot fires, and Todoroki does his thing, freezing the ground, trying to stop everyone in their tracks. But this is light work for Deku, as he breaks from the ice with zero effort. He would then fly himself directly through any zero-pointers in his way. He could feel that he is faster than ever before as he reaches Mach speed, literally tearing up the ground as he flies, before slowing down a bit to reduce damage. He arrives at the finish in mere moments. The crowd goes wild, and Deku holds his hand above his head in the air in celebration of his overwhelming victory in the first event. Eventually, the other students arrive, somewhat embarrassed by how badly they had just been outclassed. Then, the next event would be announced, with the teams remaining the same as the original. However, Deku would simply fly upwards, completely avoiding all the riffraff below, with only Bakugo being able to reach him. But whenever Bakugo would fly up to reach him, Deku would simply outspeed Bakugo and evade him until the time ran out, leading to another victory for Deku and his team. Now it's time for Deku to fight Shinzo. Shinzo would initiate the fight by saying, "Doing it for your parents. How noble! I'm sure your father is just as blessed with powers as you, carried by his quirk, just like his son." "Talking won't slow me down, you know," Deku would say somewhat mockingly as he approaches with violent intent. "Modest too, huh?" Shinzo would say sarcastically. Then boom, outside of the arena. It happened in an instant, and Deku looked behind him to see Shinzo standing in the same spot with a toothy smile. Instantly, Deku would be filled with indignant fury. His confidence, strength, and speed meant nothing in the face of a tricky power like that. He slams his fist into the concrete wall of the stadium, cracking it with violent force before being able to recompose himself, walking off to the locker room. Omni-Man would look on in disgust as he watches his son fail. He couldn't tell Deku, but a Viltrumite would never honor his opponent with life after a trick like that. Similarly to Nolan, Eraserhead had been watching Deku closely from the announcer's booth and had begun to pick up on his cocky attitude, quickness to anger, and also the fact that he had not even once been pushed at all during these events. He might as well have been playing with his eyes closed, at least when it came to the physicality. On that thought, he takes a very important note of Shinzo and knows he will be a potentially key player should things go bad. The festival would go on the same as it did in the original, with Bakugo winning the festival, seeing as Todoroki never used his fire. Bakugo wouldn't accept the win, screaming about how the only person who was worthy to fight him was Deku, and that this was a hollow win. But regardless, he'd be awarded with the winner's medal. Ida would get the call about his brother and would drop out of the festival as normal, and Deku encounters Todoroki in the hall, who stops to talk to Deku. Everyone knows you should have won the festival, but I guess your powers didn't make that muscle in your head any stronger, Todoroki says coolly. Still somewhat angry, Deku goes to leave before stopping and realizing something. Did you just make a joke? He asks. If that's what you call a joke, then you've got some seriously low standards, Todoroki dryly retorts. I'll admit, it was pretty infuriating to lose like that, but if you ask me, I think you should have won the festival. I mean, you didn't even use your fire, Deku says, trying to lighten both their moods. I have a thing about using my fire side. It reminds me of my dad and everything he put me through, Todoroki replies, looking away for a moment. I know you and your dad had a complex relationship, and that he wasn't the greatest father, but I can also tell that you still loved him anyway. His death wouldn't be bothering you like this if you didn't, and maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing to be reminded of him right now. Maybe you can turn those bad memories into good ones. Every time you use his power for good, you can change what that power means, Deku says as he puts his hand on the other boy's shoulder in an attempt at comfort. Maybe, Todoroki says before almost groggily wandering off. He seems to be having a bit of a moment and probably needs to work things out on his own, Deku reasons. And at least now Deku has cooled off from his earlier loss. The festival would end, and Ida, having gotten the news about his brother, secretly resolved to kill Stain. After the festival, Omni-Man would have a one-on-one chat with Deku, flying over their yard while Inko cooks dinner. I know that loss was probably hard for your son, and I want you to know that what that boy pulled on you was a dirty trick. If that was a real fight, the moment you regained control, he'd have been paced, Nolan says reassuringly. Well, I don't know about paced, but yeah, I was pretty mad. And the way he looked down at me, it was insulting. Like he was somehow better than me, grunts Deku, his feelings about the match still simmering in him. Don't let him get to you, son. Remember, you have a higher calling. This hero thing is just a piece of government, but you and I are something bigger than that. We have a responsibility as Viltrumites to teach the world the difference between right and wrong, Nolan says, looking almost into Deku's soul as he says it. I guess we are kind of important, aren't we? Replies Deku in a sort of hopeful tone. Oh, Izuku, more than you could possibly know. You see, we have the luxury of looking at the big picture, but also the responsibility to carry out what's right. It's a blessing and a curse, this power and responsibility. People who don't possess our strength don't understand the decisions we have to make, even if they don't necessarily like them, Omni-Man preaches. You're right, it is a lot of responsibility. I remember when I was fighting that brain thing, I couldn't lose. I had to win, or else everyone would die. I was the only person who was strong enough. Laughs Deku, indulging in his power fantasy to an extent. That's right, Izuku. Only you were able to make a difference, and I imagined your teachers didn't want you to intervene. But you ignored them and trusted your instincts, and because of you, everyone lived, Nolan says, getting closer to Deku, getting ready to say something. I do understand now, replies Deku confidently, his ego having been properly stroked. Well, maybe not Omni-Man goes to say before being cut off by Inko, coming outside and yelling up to them that dinner was ready. We'll talk about this some more another time, Nolan says as he and Deku descend. Nolan can feel his heart thumping in his chest. He was about to reveal everything to his son, but in this moment, he feels relieved that he was interrupted. He tries to shove those thoughts down, but they eat at the back of his mind as he heads to dinner. We now cut to Aizawa, Recovery Girl, Nezu, and now the newest person in the investigation, Sir Night-Eye. Unfortunately, they can't use his power to look back in the past, only the future. but they hope that perhaps if they use a quirk-enhancing drug, that he might be able to see events replay from the past. Upon hearing this idea, however, Night Eye refuses. I'd prefer not to resort to something like that immediately, especially considering the risks. No, I think we should be asking ourselves a question. Why were the top 5 heroes and Omni-Man all together in one place? Some people speculated they were responding to a threat, but it's clear they were ambushed. And considering there was no record of them connecting up, we can assume they were called to their deaths, lured to be slaughtered, Night Eye insinuates.
There's no guarantee of that, and if we assume anything, it could put us on the wrong path from the start,
says Nezu. You're right. Or, at least, you would be, if I didn't have a way to prove it, replies Night Eye, his tone confident. Everyone stares at Night Eye, waiting for said proof to be produced. Well, I don't exactly have it on me, and it's honestly more of a hunch that this proof exists. But I think I'm onto something, he says, less confidently. What exactly is this proof? Asks Recovery Girl. I believe that if we can get access to All Might's phone, we'll be able to see if he was signaled to go somewhere on short notice. A lot of the high-rank heroes have these sort of emergency call buttons that alert and notify the heroes of where crime is being committed, Night Eye informs the group. You're not the first person to think of something like that. The only problem is no one knows the passwords to any of these heroes' phones, and there's no real way of getting in without being timed out, replies Aizawa in monotone. That's where you're wrong. I know all of All Might's passwords. In fact, I made most of them because he was too lazy to bother making any password that wasn't just password with a capital P and dollar signs for S's. Night Eye pauses for a second, reminiscing about All Might. For years, I've known that All Might would die brutally. I read too far into his future. For so long, I thought I was cursed with knowledge, but now that he's dead, I find myself still searching for answers, replies Night Eye, caught somewhat lost reminiscing about the old days before All Might died. Night Eye, this is game-changing, but how do we get access to his phone? Asks Recovery Girl. Well, I was hoping that would be something that one of you could help me accomplish, says Night Eye somewhat cheekily.
I'll pull some strings, Nezu replies. I believe this concludes the new information, unless someone else has something to bring to light.
They all shake their heads.
Then we'll meet again when we have the evidence gathered,
says Nezu before they all nod their heads and leave the room silently, with Aizawa heading to class. Aizawa remains all business, not even hinting at the inner turmoil. He informs the class about the internships that they would now be receiving after the festival, so now they would need to pick some real hero names. Everyone would get hyped as they started to write down their names. The class goes up one at a time to tell everyone their hero names, and finally, Deku would, of course, pick the name Invincible. Finally! I'm so glad to be saying it. Invincible is finally, officially named in My Hero Academia. Okay, anyway, the class would all start to praise Deku on his fitting hero name. Bit on the nose, don't you think, nerd? Bakugo would say, trying to rage bait Deku. No, really? I'm sorry to hear that, Explosion Death Murder King the Fourth, Deku says facetiously. Point taken, replies Bakugo, frowning at Deku with the class snickering. Despite that, Deku remains very happy with his choice. Invincible. Todoroki chuckles to himself, thinking that he might have accidentally given Deku his name. Aizawa also repeats the name to himself in his head. Invincible. The thought sends a shudder down his spine. Ida broods and devises his plan to exact revenge on Stain just the same as the original timeline, and Deku, noticing Ida's demeanor when everyone is leaving for their internships,
tries to talk to the grieving boy, but Ida doesn't seem to really internalize what Deku says. Deku at this point already knows what happened to his brother, and after seemingly befriending Todoroki, Deku has another person he just can't stand to watch be so sad. But he has to let it go, and let Ida go where he will. This time around, Deku decides to intern with his father, and while it isn't a traditional internship, Eraserhead and Nezu just don't say anything, as keeping both heroes occupied at the same time would be beneficial. Omni-Man would mostly fly around with Deku, helping spot crimes as they happen, but he also continues to drill into Deku the responsibility of being a Viltrumite. Omni-Man has a similar scene to the show where he was interrogating someone with Deku and drops the guy from the sky, assuring Deku that he would catch the man. Eventually. This reinforcement drives home to Deku that sometimes might makes right, and that you can't always be civil with people if you want them to do what you ask. One night while on patrol in Hosu City, out of nowhere, these monsters show up and start destroying everything. They look like that bird brain guy that Deku fought at the USJ. Realizing that Ida is also patrolling in Hosu, Deku says he needs to find him. Son, I know you want to help your friend, but you need to look at the big picture. You have larger responsibilities other than your own personal feelings. We need to prioritize being heroes right now, Omni-Man insists.
Dad, what if he needs me? You can handle things just fine on your own. I'm looking for Ida,
Deku would say, flying off at high speeds. Omni-Man goes to stop him before being tackled out of the sky by one of the brain monsters into a large horde waiting below. Cutting to Ida, we see him on the losing end of the Stain battle, finding himself paralyzed and at Stain's mercy. Until, out of nowhere, Deku comes flying in and grabs Stain's arm as Stain is about to stab Ida. And what exactly do you think you're doing? He'd ask, mocking Stain.
Get out of here, Midoriya! This is my fight!
Ida would stupidly say.
What are you talking about, Ida? I literally just saved your life!
Listen, we'll talk about this later, Deku replied. It was then that Stain would take his free arm and swing his sword directly at Deku's face.
How dare you hero scum ignore me! I'll be the death of you!
Stain would cry as the sword is about to make contact. The sword would look like it's practically in slow motion to Deku, and he would pull a one-punch man and bite down on the sword, shattering it. Stain's eyes bulge out of his head in complete and utter shock. Deku's grip would then tighten around Stain's wrist, crushing it, before he would palm fist Stain's chest, sending him flying into a brick wall. All of the air in his lungs was knocked out of him, and with his last breath before falling to the ground, he'd ask,
"Just who the hell are you?"
"Didn't anyone tell you? I'm invincible," Deku would reply with a smile on his face, before suddenly Deku would hear a crash outside of the alleyway. "Ida, stay here. I'm gonna go check that out," Deku would say, not realizing that Ida just straight up can't move. He'd fly out to see what's happening, only to see the several Nomu causing destruction on the streets. However, they would pose absolutely zero threat to Deku, as he'd basically dismember them on sight. Then, as Deku turns back to the alleyway, with Ida still paralyzed and Stain recovering from the earlier blow, preparing to once more go dispatch Ida and flee. Seeing this, Deku blitzes Stain once more, grabbing him by the throat, squeezing hard. Unbeknownst to Deku, Omni-Man flies down, approaching Deku from behind.
"You really are psychotic. You were just gonna kill a teenager like a dog in the street? Just like you butchered all those heroes!"
Deku's anger rises, his self-righteousness, his pride, and his desire for justice driving him closer to the edge. "What are you waiting for, son?" Deku would pause and turn around frightened, only to see his dad hovering in the air behind him, similarly soaked in Nomu blood as Deku was.
"Dad? What are you saying?"
Deku exclaims. "I'm saying that you should finish what you started," Nolan would say with a sureness in his voice.
You want me to kill him? I can't do that. It's not our jobs."
Deku says, looking at his father, desperate for another answer. "It is our job, son. This is what I mean when I say look at the big picture. You decided against listening to me earlier, and now you have the man who was about to kill your friend and killed so many other heroes. You were just going to let him go?" says Omni-Man, gaslighting Deku. I, I wasn't going to let him go. I was going to turn him in, Deku insists. Why? So we can get 3 square meals a day? Does that sound like justice to you? I think your friend here might agree with me. Nolan gestures to the enraged Ida. Deku pauses for a moment and looks down at the seething Ida. Kill him! Just do it! He deserves to die! Cries the paralyzed boy. Deku pauses for a moment. Maybe it would be better if Stain was put to an end here and now. Never given the opportunity to kill again, Deku feels himself resolving with the decision before, boom, bright lights. A news crew follows the trail of dismembered Nomu bodies into the alleyway, where they see Invincible holding Stain by the throat. Oh my god! That kid! He beat the hero killer! And is that Omni-Man? A female newscaster would cry. Taken back by the audience, Deku drops the half-conscious Stain, who is soon taken into police custody. Deku introspects on what he was just about to do, and if that's the kind of hero he wants to be. The Nomu attack would conclude in a similar fashion as before, with the news trying to get a few questions in with Deku after seeing that he and his father had defeated the hero killer. But Deku, not wanting to say much, and already frustrated and flustered from earlier, takes Ida and flies away, debriefing Ida as they fly, leaving his father to deal with the press. What the heck were you thinking, Ida? I know what happened to your brother, but I can't believe you, of all people, would pull something like this. Deku scolds Ida. You couldn't possibly imagine what I'm going through, Midoriya. Ever since I learned what happened, my heart has been consumed by this ever-growing rage, Ida would say, finally getting movement back in his body as he looks away from Deku. Do you think that this is what your brother wants? You think when he passed on the name Ingenium, he wanted you to take that and get yourself killed? He just lost his ability to walk, to be a hero. Do you think he wanted to lose his little brother, going out on this suicide revenge quest? Deku would say, his own rage somewhat shining through. I didn't think about that. I just couldn't sit there and do nothing. Heroes are supposed to get justice, after all, Ida insists. You're not a hero yet. You're a first-year student at UA, and one day you will be a hero that serves justice to everyone who deserves it. But you can't do that if you're dead, Deku would say, beginning to pick up some speed. You're one to talk! You were just about to kill Stain too. Stop acting like you're any different, Ida retorts, his words stinging Deku. I wasn't gonna kill him! Deku snaps, scaring Ida. I wasn't going to kill him, he says again, quieter, thinking to himself that he is different from Ida. His father said so, and everything after his power showed up led him to believe that it was true. Your father was right. Stain should have died, Ida once again spits. Ida, maybe you're right. Maybe Stain did deserve to die, but you don't, and trading your life for his would have robbed the world of maybe one of its best upcoming superheroes. Stain is subdued now, and no matter how you feel about that, it can't be changed. So don't let him continue to ruin your life. He took your brother's legs. Do you really want him to take your mind? Ida would remain silent for the duration of the flight, thinking about Deku's words. As the days passed, the boys would get reprimanded, but ultimately things would go back to normal, with Ida eventually coming to Deku to thank him. Thank you, Midoriya. I was in a really bad place, and if you hadn't come to save me, I would have died for sure. You were right. I see now that even if Stain did deserve to die, that I shouldn't have been the one to try and bring him down. I can never repay what you've done for me, what I owe, Ida says, much cooler and calmer than he had been acting the past several days. Ida, you don't owe me anything. Saving your life was reward enough. I'm just glad that everything turned out okay. Deku would reply, as the two boys had become fast friends with their shared experience. Cutting to Aizawa, we see him watching the news footage on the Hosu incident. He sees the dismembered Nomu corpses lining the streets, and then the almost divine figure of Invincible floating in the air, Stain's neck in hand. It was like watching a god step on an ant. At that moment, he hears a knock on his door and closes his computer. "Come in," he says in a calm voice, only to see the last person he expects to walk through the door. It's Deku, and he seems a bit down, completely different from the video he was just watching. "Mr. Aizawa, can I talk to you?" the boy asked sheepishly. "Of course, Midoriya. All my students are welcome to ask for help," Aizawa says, trying to sound accommodating, but still unable to push his fear, curiosity, and stress down. His stomach felt like acid roiling and bubbling, waiting for the slightest pop to erupt. "I was meaning to talk to you about the Hosu incident," Deku says, almost at a mutter. "What about it?" Eraserhead replies, not sure where this could be going. "Well, I was faced with a hard decision, and I just wanted to ask you something. Do heroes ever have to kill villains?" Deku says with surprising ease. Aizawa is taken aback by this. This is probably the last question he wants Deku to be asking. "Well, a good hero is able to subdue a villain and ensure the safety of everyone without resorting to fatal violence." "But does it happen? Do heroes kill if they have to?" asks Deku once more. Aizawa pauses, knowing that the real answer isn't so black and white as he has put it. "Well, heroes have been known to kill villains in the past, whether that be because the hero goes rogue or because their hand is forced. It's not something that any hero should relish or take pleasure in, but the job can get violent, and there isn't always a clean solution." "Oh," Deku says, almost hoping Aizawa would have doubled down on his earlier philosophy. "Well, I appreciate your advice, sir. I'm sorry for asking such a strange question. I just wanted to hear it from you," Deku says, looking down. "I know you said you were faced with a hard decision. I have to ask, Izuku, were you going to kill someone?" Aizawa asks cautiously. No, I wouldn't. I was with my dad and Ida, and they were both insisting that I kill Stain, and I didn't want to do it. I didn't do it, but the more I thought about it, the more they started to make sense, Deku admits to both himself and Aizawa. "Izuku, you beat him handily. The reason we leave it up to the courts to decide what happens is because that's just too much power and responsibility to entrust to one person." Deku thinks this idea doesn't sound quite right to him. He thinks to himself, Aizawa has no idea the responsibility and power that Deku has. He doesn't understand the decisions that he has to make. Maybe Nolan was right. Maybe it is their job to show everyone else the right way. "Thanks, sir. You've helped clear things up for me," Deku says, leaving Aizawa alone once more. The hero thinks about the conversation that just occurred. Omni-Man seemed to be pushing Izuku to be more violent and to take things into his own hands. That was not something that Eraserhead liked to hear. He definitely need to inform the others about this. Reconvening on the day of the finals for Class 1A, Nezu, Night-Eye, Recovery Girl, and Aizawa all stand in a circle, with Night-Eye holding All Might's phone out in front of him. Nezu was able to convince Sukauchi to hand over the evidence, despite that being a massive crime. Now, all that's left to do is log in and see what he can find. "I suppose there's no reason to keep waiting," Night-Eye says, typing the password into the phone. Everyone stays silent with bated breath as Night-Eye begins to search through the phone to find anything that might help them find out what happened. All Might didn't seem to clear out his notifications very often, so it's hard to tell what's new and what has been sitting for a while. But instead of focusing on that, Night-Eye decides to check the emergency button as they had initially planned. I was right. He was called. It was an ambush, Night Eye says with a chill. Everyone in the room looks on in silence. Now they could only assume the worst. Now the question is, who called the heroes together? Asks Recovery Girl. There's multiple possibilities. Maybe a villain was able to hack into the frequency these devices use and send out a fake distress signal to the other heroes. Or maybe we have a mole in the hero agency, suggests Nezu. Everyone looks at each other for a moment, trying to decide what to believe. What if it was Omni-Man? Recovery Girl says almost inaudibly. I know we're suspicious of him, but to go as far as to say he killed the top 5 heroes is a bit of a stretch. We don't even know if he could kill them, replies Aizawa. Well, it's not like we have any other candidates. I mean, think about it. How is it that somehow Omni-Man survived when everyone else died? If there was a villain strong enough to kill the top 5 heroes and do that to Omni-Man, don't you think he'd be dead? Asks Recovery Girl. Well, there is one villain who could have, and I know everyone in this room knows who I'm talking about, says Night Eye. A shudder runs through the room. But that's not possible. All Might killed him years ago, Recovery Girl insists, not just to Night Eye, but to herself. I know, or I thought I did. There have been rumors recently. Sukauchi tells me old strings have been being pulled, and that the more they investigate, the more it seems they never stopped being pulled to begin with. That combined with the recent villain attacks on the USJ and now Hosu suggests he might be making a power grab. This is a lot of speculation. We can't assume either of these are true, not without knowing some kind of proof, asserts Aizawa. Well, there is one way to at least eliminate one of the options. We could ping the beacon on All Might's phone, and if I'm right, it should ping the last device to send a signal to it. It's a sort of insurance in case one of them gets in trouble. But for our purposes, it would allow us to confirm the origin of the initial signal, says Night Eye coolly. Are you sure that would work? Recovery Girl questions. Not entirely. I'll admit, I've never used something like this myself, and only know about it because of All Might. It's possible it won't ping any other device, and we'll be left at square one. But I'd say it's worth a shot, Night Eye says in a pseudo-hopeful tone. The 4 heroes look at one another once again, none of them particularly focused on the finals taking place, with the other large portion of the staff that still remains unaware. Fuck it, says Night Eye as he goes to hit the ping button. Almost instantly, the color on every person in the room's face completely drains. The ping worked, and their worst fears have come to light. Omni-Man was the one who called them, says Night Eye in a somber and severe breath. What do we do now? What can we do now? Asks Recovery Girl in a panic. We need to find Midoriya, Aizawa demands. Are you crazy? What if he sides with his father? I know you were already suspicious of him, Night Eye spits. Listen, I'm the only one here who has spent any significant time with the kid, and while I wanted to be cautious earlier, now we know the truth, and he has a good heart. He saved everyone in the USJ, and while he can be quick to anger, he's always had restraint. And honestly, can we really afford to let Omni-Man tell Izuku first? He says, assuring the group. I don't know. We still don't even know what either of them are. Although, no, you're right. We absolutely cannot afford to let Omni-Man influence the boy first. On the off chance that he does side with us, he's the only person in the world strong enough to save us from Omni-Man, Nezu replies, agreeing with Aizawa's statement. As the heroes resolve to find Deku, we cut to Izuku's house, where Inko and Omni-Man are up to their normal, less savory activities. That is, until Nolan starts to hear a chime coming from outside the room. At first, he thinks it's his imagination, but he can't stop hearing it. Suddenly, it clicks in his mind what the noise is. He instantly leaves bed, with Inko calling out for him, wondering why the abrupt pause. Nolan ignores her, though, as he flies to the kitchen, ripping the vent off the wall where his damaged suit and old phone sits. He can clearly see that All Might was pinging his phone, which Nolan knew was impossible, meaning that someone had gotten access to All Might's phone and intentionally pinged Omni-Man. Nolan's eyes widen as he realizes the gravity of the situation. In that moment, Inko, draped in a blanket, walks out, asking what's wrong with Nolan, before he looks at her with the most terrifying look she has ever seen in her life, and says, "I need to find Izuku," and then flies straight up and out of their house, smashing a hole in the ceiling. Cutting back to UA, the heroes remain blissfully unaware of Omni-Man's approach as they fan out in search of Deku. Deku wouldn't be receiving a physical exam this year, as none of the teachers were strong enough to fight him. Instead, he was requested to attend school nonetheless and participate in helping clean up the battlefields, for his physical credit. After Kirishima and Sato's exam, Deku was flying around grabbing up pieces of rubble before he heard Aizawa shouting at him. He looks over for a moment before hearing a monstrous explosion behind him as a fast-moving object seemingly just flew straight into the main UA building. With horror in his eyes, Aizawa saw that it was in fact Omni-Man who slammed into the building. His stomach turns as he realizes that the signal must have been two ways, and that everyone at UA was now in danger. Aizawa continues to run towards Deku as he floats in the sky, shouting for him to come down and talk, but it was no use as Deku recomposed himself and bolted off in the direction of the school. He arrives to see many of the students already dead from the impact. He's completely traumatized by the image, but he still flies down to save as many people as possible. Meanwhile, Omni-Man still flies through the school, causing havoc, searching for his son, until his phone pings him once more, signaling that he was close to the other device. Enraged, Omni-Man tears down the walls in front of him, only to find Sir Night-Eye taking cover in his hand. "You!" All Might cries, in an instant appearing in front of Night-Eye, his hand wrapped around the hero's throat like a vice. "I always knew you were an All Might fanboy, but his phone too? What was he, your lover?" Omni-Man says insultingly as he begins to prepare to kill Night-Eye, until he hears a voice come from behind him. "Dad?" He'd hear as he turns around to see a costumed Deku, watching as his father was about to kill Night-Eye. "Dad, what are you doing? Why are you choking Sir Night-Eye? Why is he here at all? What's happening?" He cries, completely confused about the events taking place. Omni-Man drops Night-Eye as he puts his hands up defensively, trying to show Deku that he means no harm. Instantly, Night-Eye bolts out of the room where Nolan blitzes after him, only to be tackled by his son. "Dad, stop this! What's going on? Is someone controlling you? Did Night-Eye do something?" "Son, get off of me! I'll explain everything in a moment," he says, throwing Deku off of him. At this moment, the entire school is evacuating, the students headed out front. Night-Eye scrambles out of the front of the building before Omni-Man bursts through the glass, sending sharp fragments showering over the students. Many protecting themselves, but many others were cut badly. Spotting Night-Eye, Omni-Man grabs him by the neck once more. "You can't hide it anymore. We know the truth, and everyone here is seeing it for themselves." Night-Eye squeaks out before Omni-Man rips his head from his body as Deku flies out to catch the savagery. All of the students below are showered in blood and begin screaming and running for their lives. "Oh my god! Why did you do that? Please tell me what's going on." It's at this point that we get the Omni-Man speech about Viltrum from episode 8 of season 1. "Son, we need to prepare this planet for the Viltrum Empire. This is good news. The world won't need heroes anymore. There won't be any villains. This is our duty."
And what if they resist?
says Deku, slowly drifting away from his father. Then they'll die. Listen, I had to kill the top 5 heroes to prepare this world for the Empire. And in the grand scheme of things, their lives never mattered. This planet is destined for so much more. They had to go so this antiquated system could fall for something greater.
You killed the top 5 heroes? This isn't you! You're a hero! You love me! You love Mom!
Deku insists, his rage building. I am a Viltrumite first, Izuku. You will live for thousands of years. This is what I mean by big picture. You can sit here for hundreds of years watching these animals make the same mistakes of every past generation. Or you could help me lead these people into the new empire. I do love your mother, but she's more of a pet to me. Nolan's tone assertive yet unemotional.
A pet? What if I don't listen?
Deku cries. I can't let you stop me, Nolan says. His brow begins to furrow and his eyes take on a menacing look.
This is insane! What, you think I'm just gonna enslave all my friends, take over the world for a bunch of aliens I've never met? You called Mom a pet and just think I'm gonna be on board?
Deku yells, putting his hands up.
I won't let you do this!
He screams indignantly at his father. You don't know what you're saying, Nolan says, brushing off Deku.
I know exactly what I'm saying,
Deku says as he goes in for a punch before being effortlessly dodged and pile-driven into the ground at astonishing force, causing the school to shake once more. Grabbing Deku out of the ground, Omni-Man grabs him by the scruff and speaks. All this time, I've raised you as a human. I see now I should have done it as a Viltrumite. Now your first real lesson begins. Nolan spits, throwing Deku at Mach speeds into the UA building, causing massive damage. Deku practically cuts the building in half with his body. As he's recovering on the ground, he sees Ida hanging from a rebar pipe, about to fall over 60 feet. His grip lets go, but Deku is fast enough to catch Ida, landing him safely on the ground. Ida thanks Invincible, before Omni-Man appears behind Ida, and in a split second crushes Ida's head, sending chunks onto Deku's face. Deku lets out a cry of anguish and agony as he watches his friend's corpse hit the ground.
Why did you do that? I saved him! He was going to live!
Deku cries, looking up at his father, tears in his eyes, with no compassion or sympathy. Omni-Man responds. Did watching him die hurt your feelings? He says antagonistically before grabbing Deku by the arm, chucking him through another section of the school again. He was going to die anyway. What's the difference between now or 70 years later? Nolan yells angrily as he digs Deku out of the rubble again. These people are so fleeting and insignificant. Maybe you need an objective lesson, he says before grabbing the back of Invincible's neck and holding him out in front of him as he flies through UA, Swiss cheesing the building. Deku can only hold his arms out in horror as he watches as dozens of the students splatter against his body, even some of his class and teachers too. He dreads every moment as someone he knows looks into his eyes in horror like a lamb to the slaughter before being pulverized on Deku's body. After drenching Deku in blood, Omni-Man punches Deku with thunderous power, sending him flying away from UA, bloodied and ragdolled. Eraserhead crawls out of the rubble, clearly injured and bleeding, but alive. He's able to find Nezu and help organize the evacuation effort. All they can do now is hope that somehow Invincible can live up to his name. However, Deku just keeps taking blow after blow as he's sent across Japan, leaving a wake of destruction just from the sheer force of impact. They shred through cities on their monstrous flight as Omni-Man continues to juggle his son, laying down brutal punch after punch until Deku slams into a snowy mountain. Omni-Man begins beating down on his son until he's struck by a memory. From this point, things play out like they did in the show, with Omni-Man losing his thirst for violence in his inability to justify his own actions to himself anymore. Why did you make me do this?
You're fighting so you can watch everyone die. You'll outlive every fragile, insignificant speck on this planet. You'll live to see this world crumble and blow away. Think, Izuku, what will you have after 500 years? Omni-Man shouts, enraged before pausing as he hears his son wheezing as he breathes, his cracked and mangled face oozing with crimson blood. Then Deku begins to speak. You, Dad. I'd still have you. He mutters. At this moment, Omni-Man breaks. He forgets everything about Viltrum, his duty, all his convictions and justifications. Now he's just a father looking down at his blood-covered hands and his brutalized son. Dad? Deku asks before, with tears welling in his eyes, Omni-Man flies up and out of Earth's atmosphere. At this point, the heroes are able to find and rescue Deku, taking him to a hospital where he'll be able to recover. He remains unconscious for days. All the while, the world is talking about what happened. It was impossible to cover up Omni-Man and Invincible's fight. Along with the attack on UA, the whole of the student body would be traumatized, with many of the students and staff killed in the attack. Many people would be enraged with Invincible, blaming him for what his father did. We now cut back to All for One. He's speaking with Dr. Uchiko.
So tell me, good doctor, did you acquire the Invincible boy's blood? The Dark Lord inquires.
Yes, my lord. But there are some complications,
the doctor says hesitantly. Complications? And why is that? Replies All for One in an unserious tone.
Well, I don't know how to say this, but the boy doesn't have a quirk. And with the recent revelation that Omni-Man is an alien, it's safe to say that that's why both him and his son don't have a quirk,
says Dr. Uchiko with a defeated voice. No quirk. That does put a damper on things. I'd hoped to add his power to my collection, although I believe that with proper experimentation, it might be possible to make things work out in our favor, All for One says, his voice taking on a curious air.
You've always overcome every obstacle in the past, my lord. This one won't be any different. I'll get to work analyzing this blood further. I'll find out what makes this boy tick,
the doctor replies, resolved to get results. Thank you, Doctor. With both All Might and now seemingly Omni-Man gone, there's never been a better time for the symbol of fear to rise again, All for One says, his trademark twisted grin returning to his face. And that is where I'm going to leave things for this part. At this rate, it looks like I can get about one season per video, so I've got a feeling there's going to be at least one more video. I think there are still some interesting places this story can go, even now that Omni-Man's secret has been revealed. So tell me what you all thought in the comments below. And if you've made it this far, why not hit the like button? I won't beg for a subscription, but needless to say, it's always appreciated, and I love reading all of your comments. So thanks for watching. Ta-ta! On that thought, he takes a very important note of Shinzo and knows he will be potentially key player. Fuck. It's at this point when a familiar voice would ring out. Oh, come on. Okay.
How's that?
Oh, that was bad. Ooh, yuck.
Well, I believe with some key... Ooh, that was bad. I agree. It's not like there aren't standouts every year, and we need to... There you are! You missed a wonderful speech from Izuku, Inku says scoldingly. Inku? Fuck, I keep doing it. Oh, goddammit.